Welcome back to Face the Nation. I'm John Dickerson. We continue our conversations with people we are grateful for, including 2016 Teacher of the Year, Johanna Hayes. You were talking about students before. You said there is no benefit to anyone if a student achieves high grades, if they have no desire or knowledge of how to help others. What does that mean?
It means, I think that the purpose of education is more than just graduating students who get good grades. I think that they need to be compelled to help out in their communities, to improve society, and that's really how I focus my teaching. I want my students to feel connected to their communities, to improve the places where they live, to use what they've learned in school to help out. And I think that's what all teachers should do, that students should know that it's a privilege to be able to give, and not everyone can do it. So I really bring my students out and try to get them involved in their community.
And what does that mean? How do you do that?
Oh, wow. We do all kinds of community service projects. We are actively involved in Habitat for Humanity, Relay for Life, the autism. We do homeless awareness, cancer awareness, food drives. I just want my students to know that they have the ability to improve the things in our country and in our world that they see as challenges. No matter how young they are, they still can make an impact.
And what does the student need to bring to you? What's the key quality that a student needs to learn?
Actually, I have so many students who come to me and they don't see anything in themselves. They don't realize that they have the capacity, to achieve anything. And I try to help them discover that.
Why do they feel that way?
There's a lack of self-efficacy. They've heard all the reasons why they can't do things. And I just try to remind them that you can do anything. Students, young people in general, kind of see the world from exactly where they are, the position that they're in today. They can't see, the future. And I think that teachers have the ability to lead students. We see so much far beyond, today or tomorrow. We look into the future and see the possibility that students bring.
Why should someone become a teacher?
Oh, because it's the best job ever. I think that I am uniquely positioned to impact the world, the future. I have a front row seat to all the promise that we have. I believe in what teachers do. I know that the world would be better, things will be better because I see students in front of me every day who have the ability to make those changes. So I consider myself very lucky.
All right, well, Johanna Hayes, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we turn to Brandon Stanton, the photographer and blogger behind Humans of New York. It started as a personal photography project 6 years ago. Since then, the presentation of simple but powerful personal reflections has grown into a social media phenomenon and 2 best-selling books. In our political season of division, his work was a constant reminder of our shared humanity. Brandon, I want to thank you for being here. You've interviewed thousands of people. When you took that first photograph, what did you set out to do?
Well, the process of discovering Humans of New York was very incremental. I lost my job. I was working in Chicago, and I just knew I wanted to be a photographer. I love taking photos, and I started kind of naturally falling into taking pictures of people. And then after that, I would start stopping people on the streets and taking their photo. And I'd only been photographing for about a month or 2 at that time, so I knew if I wanted to be a photographer, I probably didn't have a good chance of being the best photographer in the world. But I thought maybe I had a chance of being one of the best people in the world at stopping random strangers and taking their photographs. So that's how it began, and it grew from that into much more of a storytelling project where I actually interview these random people that I stop on the streets.
Why did you change to interviewing them?
I think it was just more interesting because I'd done it thousands of times, just stopped random people to take their photo. And I realized what was so interesting about my photography is that people were very curious about strangers around them. And I had developed this skill where I could walk up to any random stranger and enter into a conversation with them to take their photograph. And I knew if what made my work interesting was the aspect of interacting with a stranger, why not take that a step further and learn about this person?
And what have you learned over all of those interviews you've done?
I like to, instead of trying to draw similarities between everybody, I think my goal is to find something different about everybody. And, one thing that I find is that we share so many philosophies, we share so many opinions, But the one thing that we have that is truly unique and makes us truly ourselves is our stories. And so when I interview somebody, my questions tend to follow the lines of trying to find out a story about this person that I have not heard from the other 10,000 people I've talked to.
And those stories, as I've looked in on Instagram and seen them, they are so powerful because they're so personal. One recently, you were in Macomb County, and there was a couple, a husband and a wife. His wife has dementia. Tell us that story.
Right, and this is one that was kind of outside the box of what I normally do, because I was in Macomb stopping random people on the street, and I had a fan of the website send me an email. And he said, you know, my father-in-law has been taking care of my mother-in-law who has severe dementia, and would you go visit them? And so I did, and I got there, and there was this man in this chair with his wife, who he said he doesn't have her mentally, but he has her. And I sat down with them for about an hour and a half, learned the story of how they met, and they kind of fell in love, and then learned the story about how her Alzheimer's progressed. And spent some time, you know, talking to this man about the difficulties, and if you would ask him, the joys. He was a very joyful man, of watching his wife deteriorate and stepping into a relationship of caretaker, where the relationship to husband and wife kind of subsided, but the relationship of caretaker to someone being cared for came up. And you know, it was a very powerful conversation.
You went to Macomb County, photographed a lot of people, didn't mention their politics. Why did you do that?
Well, sometimes I did. I didn't look for it. I think that's the key point of the work, is that, you know, I think what makes Humans of New York unique is the randomness of it. You know, I've traveled to Iran, I've traveled to Pakistan. These are countries that have very strong narratives told about them in the media, whether they're related to the nuclear deal or whether they're related to terrorism. And so what you have is you have people being asked about their thoughts and their opinions on things such like as that. And what I do, and the same thing I did in Macomb County, is I just stop people randomly and I ask what their greatest struggles are. And you find that even in Macomb County was a very important swing county. You know, it's being talked about a lot. And every time it's being talked about in relation to the election. What's your opinion of Trump? You know, why did you vote for Hillary? And we're framing these people based on their political affiliations. But if you actually stop these people and say, what is your greatest struggle right now? It's about their wife's dementia, their son's alcoholism. And you find that they don't identify themselves in the way that we're identifying them. They see themselves as fathers or husbands. And I think Humans of New York, by stopping people randomly and giving them a chance to express their stories, shows more of the identities that people see themselves as.
All right, Brandon Stanton, thanks so much for your work, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. Earlier this month, the Surgeon General issued a report saying that 1 in 7 Americans is expected to develop a substance use disorder at some point in their lives. John Schinholzer and Honestly Liller of the McShin Foundation in Virginia are on the front lines of this epidemic. Honesty, I want to start with you. What does it look like in terms of the uptick with opioid abuse and that you see?
Right. Well, at McShin, about 80% of our participants in our program are recovering from opioid addiction. It's all around the country. It's a huge spike in lots of opiates, you know, prescription pain meds along with the heroin. The heroin is cheaper after you're done with the prescription pain meds, so it's more and more people getting addicted, and to be honest with you, at a very younger age than on average, and that's all around the nation, not just in Richmond.
Tell me about your personal story.
Well, I'm a person in long-term recovery from my SUD. I've been drug and alcohol free for over 9.5 years. I started using when I was 12 years old. I stopped when I was 26. The last 9 years of my active addiction was opioids and heroin. And I came to the McShin Foundation when I was 26 years old with nothing. Same day service. John and Carol, his wife, the Mick and McShin, took me in. I had nothing. I had a couple bags of clothes. I didn't have custody of my daughter, and I was practically living out of my Jeep. Now, today, my life is amazing. 9.5 years later, because of recovery and John and Carol taking a chance on me, I own a home. I'm a taxpayer. I can vote. I'm a mommy. I'm a wife, and I'm the CEO of McShin. So I get to be surrounded by people that I love, and I get to be able to see people change and their lives change because of recovery, that peer-to-peer, been there, done that. This is what life was, this is what life is today. So be able to help these people and save their lives and heal their families.
John, what is the most important thing a person needs who needs help?
Well, I think the most important thing is that if you have an addiction, there is help out there, that anybody can stop using drugs, find a new way to live and lose that desire. All you got to do is ask for it, and hopefully you'll find the right doorway to go through, and they'll be smart enough to give you the help the same day you ask for it. Hopefully that's what it will look like.
But a lot of people have trouble asking for help. A lot of people don't get it.
Oh my God, it's the hardest thing in the world is for an individual to come to grips with an addiction and say, look, I need help, what do I do? And a lot of times they reach out for help just to get their hands slapped. So we have to stop that as a nation. We got to start helping people. The day they ask for help, we got to give it to them instead of turning them back out in our community.
What do you mean by getting their hand slapped?
Well, a lot of times somebody will come in and ask for help from like a service provider, and they'll say they'll come back in a week or 2 or 3, and the next thing you know, you go back out into Target or Walmart, and then you're a public safety threat at that point. Then the sheriff gets you. So we've got to stop streeting people and help them the day they ask for it, to include emergency rooms in America. All across America, people are growing up in these emergency rooms, a place where they're supposed to get help for a medical condition, just to be told to get out of here. So we've got to stop that as a country. We know better. We got to do better.
Honesty, the most important thing you mentioned was that, when you're talking to somebody, you can say, I was there with you. What about as a larger culture? What does the rest of us, what can the rest of us do?
Just be a voice. It's not just those that are addicted to drugs and alcohol. It's the family members and the people in the community that have been affected. Anyone can be able to help someone, that has a struggling issue. I think it's really important to continually to talk about it. And if you have a voice in your local community with a policymaker, give them our number. We're really good at what we do in the advocacy piece, because it's not just, okay, help that individual. How do we help them? It's healing a whole entire community, and that's the nation at large. So anyone can be a voice for anything. It's just important to be educated on, what you're talking about, and been there, done that lived experience. It's not just us in recovery, but the family members that have been affected by this disease that are speaking up and going to the General Assembly and doing what they have to do as well to fight for those that don't even know about recovery, and those that are, changing their lives.
All right. Honesty and John, we really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. This is amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for what you do.
Okay.
And we'll be right back in a moment. And now back to politics and our political panel. Joining us today is Molly Ball of The Atlantic, Ed O'Keefe of The Washington Post. His colleague, Ruth Marcus, is a columnist and deputy editorial page editor at The Post. And Ramesh Ponnuru is senior editor at the National Review. Ramesh, I want to start with you. Donald Trump has made some staff picks. He's thinking about some others. Do you have a unified theory of what he's doing? Is there a clear message to the picks he's made?
I don't have a unified theory, and I'm not sure he has a unified theory either, but I would say that the transition is going much better than one might have expected a couple of weeks ago, when there was all this breathless coverage about what a disaster it was turning out to be. The interesting thing going on in the transition right now is this very public fight going on about who is going to be the Secretary of State in a Trump administration, where you have top Trump advisors like Kellyanne Conway really blasting the idea that Mitt Romney might be that person.
I'm going to hold off on the Secretary of State drama because it is fascinating to watch in public. But Ruth, I just wanted to get on some of the names that have already been made. I was interested that on the one hand, you had Donald Trump in his interview with the New York Times say Kelly Ayotte, former senator from New Hampshire, was never going to get anything because she had said that Donald Trump was not a role model for her children. Then Nikki Haley, the governor of South Carolina, who had been very critical of Donald Trump, is now the ambassador to the UN. So what do you make of those two different decisions?
Sometimes he can be more magnanimous than others. I do have to say to Ramesh, if this transition is going well, I would really like to see one that's going poorly, because let's be clear, and I'm going to just channel Tolstoy here, all transitions are chaotic, but they're each chaotic in their own unique way. This one is crazy. Well, first of all, we're having a transition by Twitter, right? He's communicating with us. Normal presidents-elect have press conferences. This one has a Twitter account with peevish tweets. That he's picking people in the most haphazard way. Usually you submit your national security team and then your domestic policy team. It's just kind of random people. You pick your UN ambassador before you pick your Secretary of State. And finally, this remarkable, I know we're not getting to it yet, this remarkable public dissent we can't stop talking about.
Well, Molly, do you sign up for that? Because Jeff Sessions, Senator Jeff Sessions, that was an obvious pick. Mike Flynn for the National Security Advisor. These are loyalists who are in the Trump camp. That seems like a...
So I do have a grand unified theory, which is that Donald Trump is running the transition exactly the way he ran his campaign, which was exactly the way he's always run his business. He creates competing power centers and pits them against one another. He likes to have underlings squabbling for his favor. It's always very clear that he is the one in charge, and he bestows his favor sort of arbitrarily and capriciously and haphazardly. So everyone is always kept on their toes. Nobody ever knows quite where they stand with him. This is his style personnel-wise and always has been. Now, there is no ideological consistency, right? Someone like a Jeff Sessions, you know, someone like a Steve Bannon, who is not a traditional Republican, paired with someone like a Reince Priebus, who is, someone like a Jeff Sessions, who's been at odds with many other Republicans in the Senate, paired with someone like a Nikki Haley, who is much more of a traditional conservative. And I don't think we should expect there to be any ideological consistency, because Trump himself has very little ideological consistency. He's much more interested in personality, and the way he seems to be making these choices, the vetting process seems to be, you know, come to my tower and I shall evaluate you. And he's making choices on that basis.
Ed, what Molly describes is actually what some people described FDR's management. Sure. Battles and fights, and then see how it goes. So there is a tradition of this. What do you make of it, Ed? And now finally we can talk to the Secretary of State point, which is this public debate going on between whether he's going to pick Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney, or maybe Bob Corker, senator from Tennessee, or maybe a player to be named later.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone who's exasperated by all this needs to get over it. This is the way it's going to be. This is the way he is. And I just think, you know, this is the new normal, in essence, for presidential management. The idea that it has to be done a certain way, I think is foolhardy, because he hasn't done anything the normal way, and he won. And so don't be surprised by any of this, is sort of what I've been telling aggrieved relatives and exasperated colleagues and everyone else. As for Secretary of State, look, my only question is, how can a Republican-controlled Senate confirm someone like Rudy Giuliani, given his business practices over the last few years, when you've spent the last several years prosecuting Hillary Clinton for doing similar things? He's been a consultant to world leaders, some of questionable degree. He's been giving speeches all over the world. He can argue that, you know, that gives him vast experience, which is the same argument in some respects that the Clintons were making, that they had these connections around the world. But, you know, I don't see how certain Republican lawmakers can have spent the last few years doing what they did and saying what they said about her, and then turn around and confirm him when he was doing much the same.
But the thing we need to talk about is the remarkable spectacle of his own campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, publicly differing with him on Twitter and in public interviews about the wisdom of Romney as Secretary of State. If anybody has any precedent for this, I'd like to hear it.
So I'll read you. Kellyanne Conway tweeted, receiving deluge of social media and private comms communications, Ray Romney. Some Trump loyalists warn against Romney as Secretary of State. And so, Ramesh, some people see that as the former campaign manager arguing with her boss through Twitter, not, you know, in the boardroom.
She says that she's given the same advice privately, and it's certainly true that this has not been done before, but I assume that she's doing it knowing that Trump doesn't mind her doing it, that he may even like this kind of drama, and so she figures, why not? I think some of the points she's making are actually reasonable ones. It is perfectly reasonable for an incoming president to want cabinet members who are loyal to him, who will not make a big resignation in principle that hurts the administration. And given their history together, one has to worry about that if you're Donald Trump, about Mitt Romney.
It's also interesting that Kellyanne Conway is positioning herself as speaking for the grassroots, speaking for Donald Trump's supporters, saying this is, and you know, I think there may be a personal side to it for her as well, but it is true that, you know, she is his connection in a way to the millions of people out there in America who are not part of any other political party or movement, but who are loyal to Trump. And if she is indeed sounding a signal that he doesn't want to turn against those people, you know, there would not be another voice in his ear or in his administration that would be speaking for those people, and presumably that's important to him.
Ed, I want to get to this question of Donald Trump's conflicts of interest. He's got businesses all over the world. As you mentioned, a lot of this campaign was about the conflicts between the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton Secretary of State. Where are we on the question of Donald Trump's private interests and Donald Trump's presidency?
Well, he so far embraces the fact that he is a global businessman and has made no publicly apparent moves to really divest himself of it all. It's a complicated thing, but I think what we need to remember is that current federal law would allow him to continue doing this. And I think the question is, will the country want somebody who is potentially a part-time president, who is also a part-time CEO of some degree? And if not, how will the public react? I think, you know, if there's evidence that he or his family is ingratiating themselves of the presidency while other things aren't getting fixed as he promised, then we'll see a reaction. But this is uncharted waters, and we'll have to see.
Ruth, he told the New York Times essentially presidents can't have conflicts of interest.
Well, let me tell you this. They can, and he does. The federal law does not cover this, but there's obviously the emoluments clause of the Constitution, and there is the way presidents have behaved in the past. This is a very dangerous road he's going down. It's totally obvious that somebody with his massive holdings is going to have a problem. He should have planned for this. He was remarkably unprepared for this, and he's been remarkably obtuse since being elected about the need, even if you're not going to divest your holdings, to separate his business life from his presidential life. Instead of separating, he's piling conflict on conflict, inviting his children into both the government and the business.
Ramesh, what do you think other Republicans should other Republicans care about this? Is it going to get in the way of business congressional Republicans want to get done, do you think?
Well, there's no statutory problem that he's got right now. I don't think he's got a political problem in the sense of his supporters in the polls turning against him. But I do think he's creating trouble for himself and his administration and for Republicans down the line, because there's the potential for any number of scandals. There's the potential that otherwise reasonable decisions get second-guessed because people wonder, is there some private interest of the Trump company that is biasing our decisions? I think they'd be better off taking steps to prevent those sorts of conflicts.
Molly, 15 seconds. Any immediate steps they could take?
Well, he could get rid of his business, but he doesn't want to do that. You know, this whole campaign for Donald Trump was about shattering norms, refusing to accept, for example, the tradition of candidates releasing their tax returns. He feels that he got away with it. He feels that he was vindicated. I think he therefore feels that he doesn't have to do the traditional things that presidents have done. We shall see if he gets away with it when this becomes about basically massive state corruption.
All right, we'll end on that. Thanks all of you for the brisk panel, and we'll be right back in a moment. That's it for us today. For Face the Nation, I'm John Dickerson.